Okay, the sun is out, but it's not warm. There's one set of squats left, and then the news. ABC News, an interview with Sam Altman on OpenAI's GPT-4, how, quote unquote, people should be happy that OpenAI is, quote, little bit scared of, unquote, its tools, misinformation, rivals, and more. Related, Bryce Elder, Financial Times. OpenAI's GPT-4 failed a CFA Institute exam, the finance world's self-styled toughest test, scoring 8 out of 24, despite the answers being available online. Sam AI Man, is doing what you have to do, which is go be the face of the business. And maybe there's something of substance in this interview. Odds are every syllable that comes out of Sam's mouth has been prepared and massaged. And so I don't know that there's a lot of value there. For me, and before we get to my point of view, the idea that it failed the CFA Institute exam, okay, something tells me it's going to pass the CFA Institute exam in a week now that we've pointed out to all of the users of this software that there's an area where it could stand to improve. But maybe I'd bet $1 and maybe I'd give them a month instead of a week. But I don't believe that this test is magically so complicated that we can't get software to pass it. But to me, that's not the interesting thing. The interesting thing to me is how this organization went from a Elon Musk funded entity that was there to develop this sort of software, this sort of technology in the open so that there could be ongoing conversations around how it's being used in the wild, how it's being developed, to now a closed system where there is effectively a single spokesperson for everything that the business does, where it has taken investment from Microsoft, and that Microsoft is driving their technologies, OpenAI's technologies, directly into every one of its products that matter. Its search engine, which, say what you will about Bing and its long history, I think what Satya said a month or more ago when the next version of Bing launched was absolutely right. Every basis point of share that they can take off of Google, the shinier Bing looks, is great for them. It's all upside for them. It's all downside for Google. But now, what the other thing that they announced this week is that all of the Office products are going to have some aspect of them enhanced by GPT-4. How did this entity go from being something that was brought into being in order to have an open and transparent development of this sort of technology with an eye toward it being ethical and used for good in the broadest sense of the word, to just being a for-profit business? Like, to me, if the ABC News crew didn't press AI Man on that question, I'm not sure they did their job. Faiz Sadiq, Washington Post, as concerns over Tesla's full self-driving rise Former employees blame Elon Musk's erratic leadership, cost-cutting measures like removing radar, and more. You know, the there's a inescapable sort of, is it a pun? I don't know if it's a pun. FSD, FUD, full self-driving, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I don't find it especially surprising that people who no longer work for Elon are very willing to go to the press and talk about what Elon's decision making process and his personality have done to give them concern over the delivery of the technology necessary for Tesla automobiles to pilot themselves in 80% of circumstances, right? Not surprising. I don't doubt that there are scenarios where the Tesla full self-driving technology is inadequate. What I, however, have extremely high confidence in is that human drivers are worse. Not as a general rule, there are plenty of highly capable, highly functional vehicle operators all over the planet today. I don't think anybody can argue that. And there are also circumstances where the current Tesla self-driving technology stack is inadequate. There is no doubt about that either. However, what's the goal? If the goal is to get Tesla automobiles to be able to flawlessly pilot themselves in absolutely every possible driving condition, then full self-driving looks really scary and irresponsible and unwise to deploy to the general public. However, if the goal is how can we be better than 80% of vehicle operators in 80% of circumstances, I have no doubt that they can succeed there. It, maybe it's just a part of the world that I live in, but the more I'm on the road, the clearer it is to me that the bar that Tesla's technology has to clear in order to be better than the average vehicle operator is extremely low. So while maybe there's something of substance in this story, it strikes me as a newspaper taking the opportunity to sell a narrative to the people who, for whatever set of reasons, already don't like Elon. Annie Palmer, CNBC. Andy Jassy says Amazon plans to lay off an additional 9,000 employees, mostly in AWS, PXT, advertising, and Twitch, after cutting 18,000 jobs in January. Empathy for the individual, always. I think a especially valuable thing for all of us as labor to learn from the last 3 months and the last 3 years. Don't rely on one entity to earn. It's not sustainable, no matter how secure you believe that entity is or your position within it. Cutting another 50% 4 months after you cut 18,000 jobs, not a good look. Especially not a good look when I think it was Tony Cowan Brown and Benedict Evans' latest episode of their show, their podcast, talk specifically about Amazon's ad business and what an absolute behemoth it is, in part because, and I'm going to severely butcher their explanation, and so I'll make sure there's a link there for folks who are interested. They basically figured out how to get sellers on Amazon to pay for better placement in search results and call that advertising. The sellers are advertising for themselves, but Amazon gets to take a piece and call it advertising revenue. And that business alone is, I want to say the number that they mentioned was between 30 and 40 billion dollars a year in revenue, I think. Don't quote me on that. Go listen to their conversation. It's a good one, as it often is between the two of them. But the fact that they're going to cut another, effectively 10,000 people, and one of the business units from which they're going to cut people is one that is effectively free money for Amazon, because sellers are already listing products and Amazon doesn't really have to do anything other than communicate to their sellers, if you want to float closer to the top of the results for whatever the thing is that you sell, you could pay some more money. It's a, I don't know, it's a massive business. It's difficult to pin it down to one thing, but it's just not a especially good look, in my opinion. Pete Schroeder, Reuters. The FDIC plans to sell Signature Bank's deposits to Flagstar Bank, excluding those in its digital banking business, some loans, and Signature's 40 branches. What do you do with retail banking branches if all of your deposits are sold to another banking entity? I mean, it's the financial system. I'm sure they'll figure out a way for someone who was a Signature Bank retail customer to go to an ATM and ask to take out $500 and have that money flow through from Flagstar, something like that. Just, I don't have that much more to say on this subject, though. Inside higher ed. A group of librarians argue the Internet Archive is a library, saying that the four major publishers' lawsuit threatens the development of digital collections. Related, Maria Bustillos, The Nation. A look at four publishers' lawsuit against the Internet Archive, which hinges on defining legal ownership of ebooks ahead of oral arguments on March 20th. I didn't know this case was coming. I'm glad to know that this case is coming, because this one is, it's near and dear to my heart. If we can't, as a culture, get to a place where the full text of what humanity has assembled as knowledge is able to be stored and made accessible legally, we're not going to get very far, right? If you've got to go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble, if you've got to go through some commercial entity to buy a copy of a book, I don't have a problem with that, except that public libraries are a thing, and they've been a thing for a long time. And if we're really going to try and draw a line in the sand and say there cannot be a single centralized public library, that kind of feels like a cutting off our nose to spite our face move as a society. Don't get me wrong, the experience of having a library card at your local branch and then using uh, the Libby app to check out an ebook, it's not bad, but libraries as independent entities, they're not equipped to collect and maintain and organize all the possible information that's available. And the Internet Archive is this thing, frankly, it's the closest sibling to Wikipedia that you will find. Like, it is an online entity that houses information which is available nowhere else. In many cases, information which was deleted, but is still available because they snapshot what's on the web at numerous moments in time. Fun example, if you're an Apple nerd like myself, go look at apple.com through the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine, and you can see what the website looked like 20 years ago. It's fun. There's not as much value in looking at apple.com circa 2003 as there is in, say, making the electronic versions of books, which are no longer in print, available to anyone on the planet. But that strikes me as something which it would be terrible if we lost the ability to do that because a oligopoly of publishing houses don't know how they'll make money on it otherwise. Carol E. Lee, NBC News. Source: in his upcoming testimony to Congress on March 23rd, TikTok CEO Shou Chu plans to reveal TikTok has 150 million MAUs in the United States, up from 100 million in August of 2020. Related, Raphael Huang, Wall Street Journal, research: ByteDance's video editing app CapCut, launched in 2020, has 200 million plus MAUs and 400 million plus downloads in 2022, up 43% year over year, surpassing TikTok in recent weeks. I haven't installed CapCut, so I can't speak to the relationship between CapCut and TikTok. But the fact that one of the things that's going to be officially revealed when TikTok CEO goes to the Hill this week is that they've got a monthly active user number which is not especially impressive. You know, especially when you consider that in August of 2020, they had 100 million monthly active users. And 2.5 years later, they have 50 million more. That's not an especially impressive growth trajectory. And moreover, these are not numbers which are, these numbers feel woefully inadequate relative to the hype in the minds of many people with regard to TikTok, right? TikTok's value in the landscape, I thought would have translated to a much more significant number than 150 million monthly active users in the United States. Is that a significant percentage of the US population? Of course it is. Is it a well-run, or is it a number which can translate to a profitable business? I'm sure, especially because that business is run in China. But to me, what I would hope that this signals is overtaking TikTok and doing what TikTok does as well or better than TikTok is not an impossible hill to climb. That if you are Meta or if you are YouTube or if you are Twitter, the thing that makes TikTok TikTok is in no small part its algorithm. But aside from that, they don't like they've got a good editing experience, right? But those are not things that can't be built, that can't be copied. And if you're chasing a business that's got 150 million monthly active users, the American businesses, and I don't say that in order to imply that it would be better for everybody if TikTok was an American owned and operated business. I don't believe that. It's still problematic for a variety of reasons, but it's an achievable goal. So this continuation of TikTok being the sacrificial wolf, I hope that these numbers act as enticement to the American born social media businesses to attack and take share because there's not a extraordinary amount of share that they need to win back. Natasha Lomas, TechCrunch. Researchers launch a free app to help artists prevent AI models from stealing their quote artistic IP by adding almost imperceptible quote perturbations to their art. I'll be very skeptical and say that if what you're building is effectively a watermarking tool for this current moment, such that if whatever little perturbation you put into your original work appears in, you know, the product of somebody running Stable Diffusion or GPT-4 or anything else, that you can make some more substantive legal claim. Yeah, sure. Like this has happened with online maps for as long as online maps have been alive, right? It's not talked about a lot because most people use an online map to get where they're going, which means fundamentally they're asking the software to paint the path for them, which means they don't study the map. But if you do study the map, you will find that whether it's Google or Microsoft or Foursquare or OpenStreetMap or Apple or anybody else who's in this business, there are additions to the road network which don't actually exist and that the routing algorithms will never use, but are there as a watermark so that they can make a reasonable claim. If that's what this is, great, good luck. But I don't see a way that that gets meaningful traction in terms of driving people away from taking your original artwork and using it as training data. I'm just not sure that there's a lot there. I'd love to be proven wrong because I do personally think that we're going to have a real cultural reckoning when somebody can go to a piece of software and say, produce a piece of work in the likeness of Vincent van Gogh and Jeff Koons and Shepard Fairey and spit something out that the user then gets to call theirs. Are you stealing from those artists? If I were an attorney, I don't think I would. I'm more likely to argue that it's not substantively different from me having sat there and studied the works of all of those artists and then created something myself, right? The the software is a tool. It's not different from a pencil or a paintbrush or anything like that. However, the other side of that argument is fairly obvious, right? If you're Shep Ferry or if you're Jeff Koons or if you're the estate of Vincent van Gogh, you can stand up and say, we made no agreement with the business that took our works and used them as training data. We deserve, to be made whole. Rachel Metz, Bloomberg, Runway, which helped create Stable Diffusion, announces its Gen 2 system to generate 3-second snippets of video from prompt words available via a waitlist. Yep, this is exactly what the next turn of the crank is. It's full motion. Human beings look at the difference between creating a single static image and creating animated motion and see a massive difference in complexity and difficulty and challenge. Machines don't. Machines just see it as, oh, I have to create 30 frames for every second of video, or 60 frames for every second of video, and each of those frames has very subtle adjustments, and bang, you've got video. Buckle up. Abner Lee, 9 to 5 Google. Researchers detail, quote unquote, aCropalypse, a bug in Google Pixel's markup fixed in March 2023, where some edited screenshots can be retroactively unredacted or uncropped. That's not the kind of bug you want, is it? I took a screenshot of something on my phone. I use the built-in tools to block out sensitive information, and then I sent it somewhere, and it's not clear from the way this headline is written whether the exploit is possible just if you have the resulting JPEG file, which would be severely problematic, or whether you need the original device in order to unredact or uncrop things. The largely unrelated thing that this makes me think of is I've been shopping for a better camera to make these videos with rather than just the camera that's built into this iPad. And there is a very old Canon camera, which if you flash the open source, I'm not sure whether or not it's open source, the freely available Magic Lantern version of the firmware, the camera's capabilities grow in a really significant way. And it makes me envision a future, right, sort of a detail from a William Gibson story, which hasn't been written, where the people who want to make photos are shopping for older tech, older hardware that they can keep alive and with which they have an intimate understanding of all of the code that takes the light that hits the CCD or the CMOS sensor and produces a file written to disk out the other end. That what people are going to want is greater transparency into that pipeline, because again, as I think we talked about on Friday, the definition of what is a photo has become more and more and more open to the interpretation of the manufacturers of the cameras in a way that at least people as old as I am not especially happy with. Tim Bradshaw, Financial Times. Microsoft plans to launch a mobile app store for games as soon as 2024 if the Activision bid is cleared and the EU's DMA rules for app stores come into effect. Now we're seeing the turn on Microsoft's strategy here. They want to own gaming. And I'm here for it for the most part. The idea that, which I've stated more than once, is what you should need as an end user in order to have a tier 1 gaming experience is a display of some description, controllers of some description, and a fast enough connection to the network. Whether that is a projector screen that is 6 feet across or a laptop display that is 13 inches across, or a set of goggles, whether you're in a car or on a train or at home or in a foreign country, racked with jet lag, you should be able to play the games you want to play. That's a better experience than what is required today, which is in all of those circumstances, right there in the middle, right next to you as the end user, you need some piece of dedicated metal that eats power and produces the gaming experience. Also, a interesting opportunity, I think, for Microsoft to land on a meaningful sort of in-house customer for its Azure products, right? Because what are they going to need on the other side in order to deliver a gaming experience over the wire? They're going to need a bunch of metal. They're already in that business, right? So if they can get to a place where the unit economics make sense, and for $10 a month, $20 a month, $30 a month, whatever it is, you're able to play whatever games you want to play, and they can make $3, $2, $1, 50 cents on every one of those months, multiplied by all of their users. That's a good business to be in. So the idea that they want to ship an app store and that they're framing that as, we kind of want this Activision deal to be done before we do that, is, I don't know, it's an interesting bit of strategy to play off of the regulators in the European Union and the United Kingdom and the United States and elsewhere who aren't totally convinced that it's a good idea to allow Microsoft to acquire Activision. But as somebody who used to really enjoy playing games, as someone who has people in their family who currently very much enjoy playing games, and I think most important, as someone who sees games as a means for socialization, even if that socialization is not as rich and maybe emotionally satisfying or satiating as in-person experiences, I want this version of the world to exist. So I'm hopeful that the Activision deal closes. Anna Tong, Reuters. Replika and Character.ai now block adult content in their chatbots, angering users who became deeply involved with them, some considering themselves married. It's not every day that you see a small software company sort of trigger the divorces or the bed death of thousands, tens of thousands of relationships. I don't know how many active users either of these products had. It feels relevant to mention that there was Ryan Gosling film from, God, it could be 20 years at this point. Lars and the Real Girl, I think is what it's called. It's a story of a guy who, you know, forms a relationship with an inanimate human female sex doll. These things look awkward and easily dismissed on the face, I think. But the part of the iceberg below the surface of the water is, as a species, we don't, we're not equipped to reckon with the men. I'm sure it's not exclusively men, but let's focus on them for a moment. The men who, for whatever set of reasons, don't wind up in healthy, symbiotic, loving partnerships with other men, other women, other whatever, other people. Not whatever. It wasn't supposed to be a word I wanted to use. So the notion that there's the ability for someone to form a relationship with something other than another human being, I don't think it's going away. And turning off the ability for the users of these pieces of software to have sexually explicit interactions or experiences, I think all it's going to do is, well, my fear is that what that does is it further sort of uh, caricatures and diminishes the people who, you know, were making use of these tools, as opposed to how do we identify the what these human beings need that they're not getting. And that's a really difficult issue to deal with because in the history of the species, again, using a very traditional framework of men and women, uh, men will by force keep women in their lives. And we absolutely can't go back to that dynamic. That's fundamentally not good. So what do we do instead? And like them or not, these tools, as well as Lars's sex doll, were something in the realm of what you can do for people with this sort of need in their lives. Lucas Shaw, Bloomberg. Sources: Netflix's ad-supported tier reached around 1 million monthly active users in the United States after its second month, and the company fulfilled its forecasted deliveries to advertisers. Netflix, for a very long time wanted to be the flag bearer of, we're not going to do advertising. We're not going to pollute the experience of, we have things you may want to watch. You give us money, we will give you access to those things. I understand that, but as someone who, you know, spends a lot of hours every week working in a bar, there's a television in the room. I personally have no interest in American football, which is, I understand, a minority point of view. And so I like the fact that I can go and pick out any number of bizarro pieces of filmmaking and put them on the screen in the bar. It gives some people something to look at, whatever the value of that is. I don't know. But the fact that I can do that relies on that content being ad supported, right? Because the money that's being spent to run that business, there's not a lot left over to say, oh yeah, let's spend $10 a month to make sure that, you know, everybody can pick something fun from Netflix to put on. That's not going to happen. So the fact that Netflix has an ad supported tier, although in this particular case, my understanding is it's not entirely ad supported, it's just ad subsidized. Uh, Good. Get to a place where you can cater to all possible users. That strikes me as the business Netflix needs to be in. I would say that while the ads on Netflix is the popular thing for people to talk about with regard to Netflix, the thing I would like to see more attention on is that Netflix continues to hold firm on not allowing any other piece of software to understand their library index such that as an end user, you can use a different piece of software to find what you're looking for. And if Netflix has it available, it shows up in those results, right? If you open a modern Apple device and you go to the TV app, it will bring forth to you whatever the thing is that meets your search term and then point you to whichever provider can connect you to it. Netflix won't participate in that. To my understanding, they also won't participate in a similar interface that Plex offers, and I don't know who else is in that business. But that, to me, I understand the strategic notion of like being the choke point in the selection interface, but I challenge anyone to tweet at me and say that the Netflix browsing and selection experience is everything they want, and that they couldn't possibly imagine a scenario where they want to use a different piece of software to interact with Netflix's library of content. Please, I want to hear from you.